session today. A session that is really truly important on youth and women in politics. But before that, let me welcome you to the Rise World Summit, the 10th edition. And we're truly proud of it, a milestone for our community as well. At the Rise World Summit, we have over 6,200 participants from over 70 countries right now on the platform. And I can imagine that they are all in so many different sessions that are happening across roundtables, workshops, storytelling, films, dance, and more. And I hope that you will also explore, but after this session, because right now we have with us some really amazing people who are going to talk to us about their experience with youth and women in politics. We are truly proud to be partnering with the Gideon Alumni Association of Nigeria and the British High Commission at Uche. It is truly, truly our pleasure. And to get us started, I am going to request Kester Osenya, the president of Gideon Alumni Association Nigeria, to please set the context as to why are we having this conversation and what can we expect from there. Kester, over to you.
Thank you so much, Karen, and I really appreciate this. We appreciate the opportunity to partner with your team. We chose this topic because it's quite crucial, particularly at this time in our national history as we prepare for election this month in Nigeria, the presidential election, the governorship election, and the parliamentary election. Particularly in our nation, where we felt a lot of the gender are not, particularly the female gender, are not well represented when it comes to gender equality, which is one of the major SDG agenda of the United Nations. We also felt it's time for the youth to take up leadership responsibility. And we've put together a team of experts who will speak on our behalf. We have Dr. Uche here, who lectures at the London School of Economics, LSE, in the UK. Then we have Prince Gideon Olanrewaju, who actually have an association that had worked with youths all over Nigeria, giving them opportunity, training them on different interventions, particularly for education and political participation. We also have here Hawa Gambo, who is a House of Representative aspirant. She's a woman in ADC, a party in Nigeria, self-funding her political ambition, moving into an environment that women hardly take up such challenges, that is contesting for House of Representative election. It is difficult, particularly in our nation, where so many women had been neglected in the scheme of things, particularly when it comes to political offices. This is the reason why we felt it's crucial for us to take on this topic at this time, particularly now that the election period is here. We felt political participation of the youth is crucial if we want to build a nation that is credible. The youth has a lot to bring to the table. So many of them are now beginning to see the need to vote during the election. What we call PVC in Nigeria is the permanent voters card. You might have seen on the news where people queue for hours just to get their permanent voters registration card. No one wants to be disenfranchised again. Everyone wants to vote on election day. That is why youth and women in politics as a topic is crucial at this time of our national development. Thank you for the privilege to partner with the organization, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
And I think, the very point you made, that at this moment, as we are having this conversation, there are the elections going on, and therefore you could not have a more pertinent time to really have this conversation and encourage, more youth and women in politics, as well as sensitize everyone to why this is so important and get them talking about it and create more awareness around it. So thank you very much for this timely session. And of course, thank you very much for also introducing our three experts who are going to be talking about this. But what I'm also going to do is ask them to again introduce themselves, very briefly for the sake of our audience so that we get to know more about them. Um, you know, at the RISE Summit, we do things very differently. As you see, I did not say I'll read your bio or I'll read your profile, because I believe, when you're just reading something, there's no life to it, right? There is no emotion to it. Whereas when you are presenting or you're talking about yourself, I think we hear right from you, who you are, what you are, and what you do. And I think nothing better than that to make people to relate to you and your work. So I am going to request you to do that one thing. The other thing that we are going to do differently is the format and the structure. At the Rise World Summit, we don't have panels and we don't have presentations. So it's not as though we are going to have these Q&A sessions, and it's not as though we are going to have any kind of presentations, right? It's a conversation, it's a discussion, it's a dialogue. And the reason again for this is because the Rise World Summit is about thought leadership, and we want to encourage people to think differently and act together. And when you think differently and act together, magic can happen. That is what we truly believe. And therefore, the whole session is going to be divided into three parts, right? So just so that everybody knows what to expect and how we'll be flowing and how we'll be moving around, is that we first start with challenges. What are the challenges with respect to this topic? How are we going to deal with these things? Goes to the next section, which is on capabilities and capacities that we have to create solutions and innovations. And then the last part, which is talking about collaboration. How can we solve these problems together, right? We want to think differently, but we want to also make sure that we don't just work in silos, but that we actually act together. So I hope with this background to the session, we can get started. How does that feel to everyone? Can I have your videos open, please? And on. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Sounds absolutely fine.
Excellent. Thank you, Gideon.
No worries.
Hawa and Anu. Right. And before we get into the introductions of our three experts, I'm also going to introduce very quickly that we do have with us Anu Varghese John, who is the planning specialist and the special assistant to the UNRC resident coordinator of Nigeria. So it's great. Anu, would be nice to say hi to you as well. And Hawa, if you could turn on your video, please.
Hawa and Anu, please put on your video. Let's see you.
Yes. Oh, I hope she's not having some technical bandwidth issues. Okay, I'm sure Anu will come back and we will get her into the conversation. But in the meantime, we can get started. And Gideon, since you said hi first, you get to go first. Yes. So why don't you please share something about yourself to our audience. Of course, as Kester already mentioned, Gideon is the Chief Executive Director for Aid for Rural Education Access Initiative, working with youth across Nigeria. And Gideon, over to you to hear some more about your work. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Karen. Good afternoon, morning, evening, and good day to everyone on the call. Saying greetings to my senior bosses as well, the president of CAN, as well as Dr. Uche, as well as Madam Hawa. So my name is Gideon Olanrewaju, as you rightly mentioned. I popularly refer to myself as an educational development practitioner because I've devoted my time and my practice over the last 8 years to support the development of educational employability and empowerment initiatives to support children, youth, and women across disadvantaged communities and conflict-affected communities across Nigeria. I am also a researcher. I'm currently a doctoral fellow for education at the University of Cambridge. I belong to the Modeling College, and I'm researching about refugee teachers and how we can leverage on technology-supported tools to enhance ongoing professional development for refugee teachers and teachers of refugee. The work that I do at my organization, which is Aid for Rural Education Access Initiative, also to some extent extends, demographic development for young people from these communities who are interested in living up to their fullest potential through political participation. So over time, we've partnered with organizations across Nigeria to host boot camps that support young people on understanding their civic responsibility as well as their civic duty to not only vie for office, run and win, elective offices, which is one of the key things I will be sharing as a part of this conversation. I think by and large, by virtue of experience and expertise, I'm the youngest here, so I would also be leaning on the academic and professional expertise of both Dr. Uche and Madam Awa, who are actively in the field. So I'm really looking forward to the session. Thank you, Karen. Over to you.
Karen, you're muted.
Sorry. I'm going to now invite Dr. Uche Igwe, the visiting fellow at the Firoz Lalji Institute for Africa at the London School of Economics and Political Science and the International Center for Policing and Security at the University of South Wales. So Dr. Uche, we are very, very keen to know more about your work and understand, how you are looking at this topic and what your work is, how does your work get connected to it as well? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you, my President Kester and Gideon, who was a student in my school, University of Sussex, and all of you. My name is Uche Igwe, and I'm a political economy analyst, and I'm based in London, but I also frequently visit Nigeria. And what I do basically is to look at politics from a lens. Look at political evolution in a country like ours and mirror into events in Nigerian political life, for instance, the elections, and provide expert analysis about what has changed and what is changing, and predict with some level of certainty what the scenarios may look like. I tell people I read and write for a living. So I research, I teach, and as much as possible, I also get involved in events, on Africa, on Nigeria, not only on politics, also on security, because some of all of these things, play very significant roles in shaping political outcomes. And I'm going to elaborate on these as we continue in the session. So yes, that's what I do. I just read, write for a living, and I use the lens of politics and economics to make predictions on political development, not only in Nigeria and also in Africa. And I do this from London. And I'm happy to be here. I'm happy that we're all thinking differently to act together. I come to India from time to time. I come to Raisina Dialogue in India every year, and I have learned so much about the similarities that can exist between India and Nigeria. And I'm excited that this event and actually membership of the Commonwealth connects us intimately, because I believe that in the world of technology, as you can see, we can be in different places, but we can be connected. So we have a lot to learn from each other, and I'm excited that this platform is providing that opportunity for exchange in contextual experiences, also cross-fertilization of ideas, and learning together. So thank you, and that's all now from me.
Absolutely, and welcome, no doubt. Next, we have with us Hawa Gambo. a multimedia journalist, and a co-founder of Shirios Nigeria. I think that's really, really another very interesting part to bringing women in, and journalism is definitely a big way. Inslee, I must tell Dr. Uche, there's nothing just about research and writing. It's a very, very critical and important part, because we are losing the art in less of it more and more, right? So I think it's a very important thing. So thank you for doing that. And Hawa, may I ask you to, is Hawa back, or has she dropped out again? Oh dear. Okay. All right. Anu, yeah, we have Hawa here. Hawa, can you hear us? Can you unmute and join in? No, I think she has a very bad connection. And the same is with Anu. Okay, so let's continue with the conversation, and hopefully they'll be able to join back with some good connection so that we can hear them and also see them. And that'll be really great. Okay, I at least got Anu back, so that's good. Anu, you want to just say hello and say a little bit about yourself as well before we start the conversations itself, please?
Yeah, hi from my side, and I want to say hello before my internet starts playing a trick on me again. Sorry about that. Yes, I'm Anu Verghese John, and I'm here in Abuja, Nigeria. I'm with the UN Resident Coordinator's Office here in Abuja. I'm the strategic planner, and was very pleased to be part of the planning exercise wherein we developed the cooperation partnership framework with the government of Nigeria going forward for the next 5 years, 2023 to 27, which obviously has a big pillar, which is part of what the UN supports the government with, to do with governance and peace. That being the recent experience, I am someone who's worked in this area on crisis prevention and peace building across the last 15 years. To mention a few countries, it includes Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Yemen, and most of them conflict, post-conflict, and transitional settings. And this is an area of work which is extremely important, and I feel the gap close to my heart, and therefore it was very important for me to be part of this conversation to see what we as a global community can contribute to make sure that women are a part of politics, both at the global level and at the national and local levels. That's it from me. Thank you, Karen, for this lovely summit.
Thank you very much, Anu, and we look forward to you as well contributing to this conversation. We have a smaller group than most of our roundtables because we do like to have a larger number. But you know, because you are so busy with the election, I was like, that's fine. It doesn't matter. You know, you're taking time out, and for us, that's a really big gift, and we're very happy to receive that. And of course, take it by giving that gift to our community, by having the opportunity to listen to each one of you. So thank you again for being here. And we will get started. As I said, that we will start with challenges, right? What are the challenges? And I think, you know, one of the things that I did do sometime a few years ago at a International Women's Day, when somebody said, you know, take a pledge. And my pledge on that day was to say that to involve more men in women's issues. And so I'm really glad to see over here that we actually have, you know, two men with us. And then, of course, we have Hawa and Anu as well, and then Kester. So it's not completely unbalanced, and which is great, right? Because we do need to have voices that have from both sides. And so therefore, Gideon, I'm going to come to you, you know, with the first question, really, okay? As to what do you think? Sorry?
Yeah, I'm following you, yes.
Yeah, okay. So great. So what do you think, why do you think it is important to have women and youth in politics? You know, what is your thought on that?
Thank you very much. As far as I know and how I've, you know, been a student of history and politics in Nigeria by virtue of being a Nigerian citizen, I think I would summarize the significance of youth involvement or youth engagement and female political participation into 5 major points. So 5 major reasons why I think it is important that women and youth should not just be spectators, but must be active contributors as well as participants in the political process anywhere in the world, but particularly Nigeria. I think the first one will be about diversity of views. It is really, really important that over time, the policies that we have and the political structures and the componential element of structures in Nigeria do not take into account the voices of young people or the needs of women. And if there is anything that the involvement of both women as well as youth would do, if they are involved in political processes, it would be that there will be diversity of views. It is important that there is a diverse range of views that helps to create more inclusive and effective policies. So I think that's the first one. If we get them involved, they contribute their own thoughts and ideas to ensure that those processes within political structures is not only representative of men, but also puts into cognizance the needs of young people as well as the female gender. The second thing will be about representation. I think if there is one key thing that the development agenda, whether it is in the era of the Millennium Development Goals or now that we have the Sustainable Development Goals, have over time reiterated and emphasized on, is the idea of equity and inclusion, right? The need to ensure that anybody, anywhere, regardless of who or where, limited by geographical location or socioeconomic status, is represented in the development process. And politics is the developmental process. It borders on how do we grow the society, the economy, and the environment. Because of that, the second most important reason would be about representation. When you give women and youth the room to make a significant portion, they make a significant portion of the population. And because their perspective and lived experiences also matters, it is important that that is represented in political decision-making processes. And I think because these decision-making processes affect their lives, it is important that we give them room, we provide the platform for them to join and also contribute and shape agenda that can affect their own personal lives as well. So the second point will be about representation. The third thing will be about improved outcomes. By virtue of, the development era that we are having a mix of, Gen Z, millennials, ideas are continually being transient, being interpreted by virtue of age, right? The way that our fathers or those who are between the ages of, let's say, 55 and 75, think about some issues within the development process is different from the way that someone between the ages of 25 and 35 would think about it, right? And research has also shown that women and youth, when they are involved in politics, policies are more likely to address their needs, right? And that is because it is reflecting some lived realities, right? And that is the dichotomy of politics that many of our political leaders do not understand. The way they view things, the way they interpret some of the issues that happen, it is not representative of the lives of an average Nigerian youth, right? An average Nigerian youth right now who have to suffer to stay on a queue, to buy petrol, who have to suffer to try and open their mobile application, either Zenith Bank or Access Bank or GT Bank, that are even not opening right now to make payment, finding it difficult to get cash handy, either from an ATM or from a bank to make payments. Many of our politicians are not experiencing the difficulties the Nigerian youth are facing right now on the street of Lagos or on the street of Kaduna or Kano. And because of this, they make decisions that do not in any way translate to result for an average Nigerian youth. So if young people who by virtue of their everyday living experiences can go into corridors of power and make active decisions, there is no way there won't be improved political outcomes. So the third point will be about improved outcomes. The second thing will be about leadership development. I have seen over time that many young people are unable to translate their life aspirations into very tangible outcomes as a function of gap in leadership development. If there is any structure that I think, if you understand what you're doing, gives you room to mold yourself to be a leader, a servant leader, is politics. right? The way politics has been shaped in Nigeria that do not give room for young people to participate has made us have, young people who are not even interested in the subject of leadership, right? And it is interesting and important that you cannot lead, even your own personal life, if you cannot translate such into political structures. So it is important that political participation enables women and youth, present them with opportunities to develop their leadership skills. And if that happens, they can translate that to become, social change agents, either in their immediate families or in their communities at large. So leadership development is the fourth important point of why, we need to give room for young people and women to actually engage. The last one is the one I'm hoping that, Dr. Uche will share more. And that will be about leveraging on the youth demographic and the female gender power or the female agency to strengthen democracy. There is something that is dynamic about being a youth. There is something dynamic about being a woman or being female. Combine the intrinsic power of these two demographic populations together can enable us to strengthen democracy in such a way that we can be able to not only hold our leaders accountable, but also support. And that is the thing about how in the Nigerian space it is being interpreted. When you see young people or women trying to, contest for political offices, it has been seen as a competition. And the business of politics is not about competition if it is being practiced in the right way, if we are indeed translating the actual definition of democracy into our political sphere. But if we are not practicing it the way it should be, which is a system of power for the people, by the people, and with the people, there is no way we are going to open up those spaces to ensure we support, young people and women. So I think it is really, really important that we give them that platform as a way to strengthen our democracy. It is the lack of all of those 5 things: lack of representation, lack of diversity of views, lack of diversified outcomes, limited leadership development, as well as weakened democracy, that still represents the major 5 challenges that I think our political system has right now, that is, disenfranchising young people as well as women in engaging in the political process. If we can fine-tune and provide room to mirror all of these things in our, political agenda, there is no way that we would not see a better, electoral system or, practice democracy in a good way, or even have improved female and youth political participation. So those are the 5 things that I think can be better, that represent challenges right now, and also present the solutions going forward in the Nigerian democracy. Thank you, Karen, over to you.
I mean, that passion reverberates, I can assure you of that. And I'm sure many of them who are listening to you right now and who listen to you later when we broadcast this also will definitely feel that passion. And I think that comes because you really understand, from the depths, right? Now, when I look at this, I'd like to kind of maybe sum it up in one line. But before I do that, I'm going to request the other speakers, please come and build on these topics, build on these points. Yeah, it's like I said, it's not a Q&A, it's a conversation, it's a discussion, and it'd be great to have each of us building up. So I'm just giving you all some time to think about something to come back on this. But good to come back to you, Gideon. I think, what it really comes down to or boils down to is that youth and women are necessary for politics from both sides of that equation. One, because they will benefit. If we want to leverage the dividend, as you rightly said, we need to build their capacities, right? We need to give them those opportunities. And when you do that, right, it goes to the other side of the equation where they start becoming contributors. So not only do they benefit because of the opportunities that come out of this, they also start contributing. And therefore, you start creating this virtuous cycle, of enabling and contribution, enabling and contribution. The more you enable them, the more they can contribute. And the more they contribute, the more you will bring in more people. And that's how you're going to really create that virtuous cycle of scaling up both the impact as well as the contribution and enablement. So I hope that makes some sense. But to go on,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Yeah. Howard, do you want to maybe build on what Gideon said in terms of the role of women in politics? And yes, please, if you could also say a few words about your work, because we missed you when we were doing the introduction. Your bandwidth holds up. Perhaps you could, if you can turn on your video, is great. But if you think it's not going to be so proper, then we are happy to hear your voice as well. Go ahead. Howard, would you like to unmute yourself, please? No, doesn't look like Howard is still with us. I think maybe still struggling with the bandwidth. That's fine. So I guess we will move on to Dr. Uche. If we can have you come in, Doctor, and maybe build a little bit on these points before we talk of some new points as well. Yeah, over to you. However, I can see, yes, you're unmuted. Go ahead. Excellent. No. Oh dear. Is Dr. Uche also not with us on the call?
I guess they're having network issues, maybe.
Yes, I know. Okay. We can continue.
Yes,
And we should, yeah, absolutely, right? So
Yeah.
Gideon, then tell me one more thing. I mean, we've
Okay.
spoken and you've said, five points that you've brought up, which are going to be so important for us to know. So if we understand why they are important and we understand where the gaps are, right? Then what is stopping us from bringing more women and youth into politics? What is these entry barriers that are not allowing us to do that?
Okay. So I'm a huge fan of numbers. So I would again say there are 5 things that I think, can, yes, I mean, he enables us.
Don't worry about that, Gideon, because I'm the acronym lady. Okay. For me, everything is about.
Awesome.
Right? So please go ahead, please.
From what we saw, so if you're familiar with the Nigerian political space, on 31st of May 2018, the president of Nigeria signed into law something called the Not Too Young to Run Act, which is a bill, right, that seeks to reduce the age limit of running for elective offices, political elective offices in Nigeria. So historically, within the Nigerian democratic space, there has always been the first thing, which is the age barrier, right? So let us talk about the one. Let's applaud one of the barriers that has actually been solved already before we go to the ones that have not been solved. So in Nigeria right now, one of the things that have over time limited young people, particularly from vying for offices, would be their age. So formally, if you are let's say above or below 40 years old, you cannot run for the office of president in Nigeria, right? But right now, if you are 35, based on this bill, the Not Too Young to Run bill, you can run. The same goes for governorship and senate. Before, if you're 35, you cannot. But now, if you're 30 years old, you can. So that has been done. It was a nationwide policy that was highly applauded. But when you think about this, reducing the age to run for political offices is not enough. It is not enough. So the first thing that I would say would be the financial incapabilities or the financial constraint to running for office in a typical Nigerian space, right? In a space where the unemployment rate is at 35%, where many young people who are even employed are struggling to, because of inflation, to survive on the limited amount of money that they are able to get as salaries and save. You cannot expect, with the current financial range to which you can, run for office and win an office in Nigeria, run for office as a young person. What I'm saying is running for political office in Nigeria, by virtue of my knowledge today, can be very, very expensive. And women and youth may not have the financial resources to launch a campaign, let alone buy the political form, right? Let alone run grassroots campaigns, obey the laws of resource mobilization to ensure you can deliver on your dream to actually win an elected seat. That in itself is a huge barrier that I think if we want to increase the number of young people or the number of women that are getting into elected offices within our political system, we need to address that. The first thing, financial constraint. The second thing will be about social attitude, right? That are traditional, cultural, and societal misconceptions about the capacities of women. I work in education, and by virtue of academic training, I can confer that over time, there are premonitions that the role of a woman, for example, ends in the kitchen. You would be agape by that kind of assumption in the 21st century, right? In a time and age where we have ChatGPT writing, SOPs for students, people will still believe that our girls and our women cannot do anything in the society other than being second fiddle. Now they have translated that erroneous misperception into political systems such that they believe, let's say, for example, for the APC presidential aspirations this year, there was only one female presidential aspirant who, interestingly, on the night of the primary elections of the leading ruling party, APC, had to step down. Out of about 27 or less people who was even running for that office, only one of them was a woman. And I think one of the things that has translated to that kind of reality is because there are social attitude that creates an hostile environment and makes it difficult for even women and youth to say they want to participate because they will be stigmatized, right? Now, it is more like a stigma if women says that we want to stand and run for office. To some extent that some men will go to the length of mocking them, that why don't you rather go back to your husband's house instead of coming here to say you want to run for presidential seat or governorship seat. It would interest you that in the history of Nigeria since independence in 1960, we have less than 10 female elected governors historically in Nigeria's democracy. Less than 10. That is not something to write home about for Africa's largest economy. It is not applaudable. So the first thing, financial constraints. The second thing, social attitude. The third thing will be lack of political experience. Karen, we will not shy away from the reality that winning in politics has a lot of things to actually do about political experience as well. There is something called political acumen. We cannot shy away from that. There is something called a school of thought, such as we have the school of politics. Many young people cannot adequately survive, quote and unquote, in that kind of a school if they do not have the experience. And that is why for many young people who really have the aspiration, who have the energy, who have the desire to run, there are some things that are amiss, that are missing in terms of skill set or even experience that makes it very difficult. That in itself is a huge barrier because you will get to some quarters and they will test your abilities. You want to run for office. It is not, and I have a popular saying as an individual that passion is not enough. The passion to run for a political office is not enough. Capacity is important. So passion is key, but capacity is key. And political capacity is also a huge factor. So you cannot just say, oh, because the president has signed a not too young to run bill, I want to run for it.
Right.
Of that, you don't have the capacity you want to come. Now let me go to the last one. It's 5, but I will give 4. Lack of representation.
Okay.
It is important that also change. Let me give the room for Dr. Uche.
Yes, I was just hoping to bring him in because he's just managed to come in, so I do want to. But very quickly, if you can close the 5th point, and then we will ask Dr. Uche to come in. Please, go ahead.
Awesome. So the lack of representation that I was talking about, women and young people are also often underrepresented because of one thing. This in itself will be controversial, but I do not mind to talk about it. Every stage of development requires individuals who draw you up. And there is also the component of political mentorship. Historically in Nigeria, I will categorically tell you, Karen, if I want to run for political office today, there is only one person. And because we are on a public forum, I would not want to mention names so that it doesn't appear that I'm tainted. There is only one person historically in Nigeria political history that I can talk and say is my political mentor. Young people want to go into politics and they need the right role models. If I look at our chain of leaders right now, for me personally, I can't see anyone. That in itself is a barrier to entry. I am not motivated to go into politics because I do not see those who represent my values, who represent my ideals, and who adequately represent, the kind of political future that I may want for myself. And because of that, it is a barrier to entry as well. So I think I will turn it back to
you. Awesome. I'm going to encourage you, Gideon, to please share your points on the general chat, because I think sometimes people, they don't get enough time to absorb all of it, and I don't want them to miss it. Yes, we are going to have a report later on, and all these points are going to go in the report, and we will share that with you. But, at the same time, I do want the audience right now also to benefit from what you're saying and not to lose or miss out on something while they've been listening to you. So can I request you that as we talk, there is a general chat tab. If you could just please put down some of these points, the previous 5 and these 5, I think it'll be very nice to get feedback from the audience as well, and they could comment and chat on your points. Yeah. Please, if you can help us with that, I would really appreciate it. Okay. And now I move to Dr. Uche. Dr. Uche, you heard Gideon, and there have been a lot of points that he has brought up, actually 5 and 5. One on the aspect of why it is so important to bring youth, women in politics, but also what he spoke is that while it is very important, there are equally that number of entry barriers that does not allow it to happen. So how do you feel about this, and what do you think we should be looking at when we think of these as challenges?
Okay, thanks a lot, and thank you, Gideon, for that erudite take on both the challenges and opportunities. I probably would like to spend a few minutes on the opportunities, and I looked at the numbers. I looked at the fact that currently the 49%, some say 49.4% of the total population in Nigeria are said to be women. And another 70% of the total population in Nigeria, and some say the population has grown up to 375 million, others may not agree, but 70% of this population, we are told, are the young people. So if democracy, government of the people, for the people, and by the people, if democracy is about participation and inclusiveness. So I want to reinforce the points made by Gideon, that it is urgent, as it were, that both women and the young people get involved. And I also say this because it is the trend, global trend. Maybe not in Africa, because Africa democracy tend to be aging. From Nigeria to Uganda to Cameroon, even to Rwanda, you see a situation where, many people who are not exactly young are, holding sway to power. But if you step out a bit, to Canada, maybe not to the United States, and to a few other countries, you will see, even to France, for instance, you will see that young people or younger people, as it were, are blazing the trail. So this is an important opportunity, if you ask me, for a country like Nigeria, that is very dominant in the continent, to also live by the example of the global trend. Another thing I wanted to speak to is the issue of technology. Technology has come to stay with us. In a country like Nigeria, more than 100 million people are connected to the internet as I speak. And out of that, we hear that 34 million persons, and probably more, are on Facebook alone. And more than 5 million are on Twitter. So there are, and I want to say without equivocation that if you look at those numbers that are technology compliant, you will see that many of them are young people. And many interesting conversations today. Indeed, there is no conversation that is going on in the world today until you take it to Facebook, you take it to Twitter, or you take it to Instagram, you take it to the social media. That conversation will not be complete. So if you want to talk about democracy realistically and you want to connect with the people, you need to connect with these important platforms. And I want to say that in this important platform, many of the people on this platform are young people. Again, this speaks to inclusiveness. And I think these are the two important things. In a city like Lagos, for instance, and I'm sure that one or two persons in this platform, or I'm sure a couple of people who connected are connecting from Lagos. We read that 60% of the inhabitants of Lagos, up to 10 million people, are the young people. So I think that, you know, for democracy to thrive in our country with these interesting demographics, youth inclusion, women inclusion has become a condition sine qua non for a thriving democracy. That said, I want to say that there is a situation, something that happened in 2020, I'm sure, and that is the EndSARS. A few years ago, many young people realized, I mean, they came out to demonstrate publicly against police brutality in Nigeria. It was supposed to be a protest that was going to be localized in Lagos, and slowly, systematically, through the social media, it caught fire across the country. And the EndSARS became a defining moment for the frustration of young people in terms of getting their voices heard. And there are so many campaigns that sprouted from EndSARS. But a very important thing that came out of EndSARS is that the young people themselves realized that they need to change their strategy to get their voices heard. And part of changing that strategy will be getting involved in politics, and then, you know, trying to get registered and trying to use their votes to express their voices. So this is to say, in terms of participation, that self-awareness by the young people is also an important driving force. And many people do not know this, and some do, that the EndSARS redefined the political landscape of Nigeria. So the thirst of young people have increased so badly that a risk, not including young people, has become a very big risk. Indeed, those who are looking at the terrain for the 2023 election, they predict that if the voices of young people are not heard, and for them to sufficiently believe that they spoke with their votes and their voices, there is a risk, for violence. The same way EndSARS erupted into violence and the political elite became the target of this violence, there is a likelihood that if the young people are not included and do not believe that their voices reflect adequately, all of us who are in the country, especially the political elite, stand a very big risk. So I think that not only the demographics speak to the urgency of including young people, not only, we also need to talk about the implications of not including them. Violence, cannot be ruled out. Having spoken to some of these issues, I want to speak to one or two of the constraints, and I'm certain that Gideon spoke to some of them. The biggest constraint, really, and I know that the legislation is there, the enthusiasm is there created by the NSAS, but the biggest problem to the inclusion of young people and indeed women, they are financial. Nigeria remains the global capital of poverty, and very many young people, there is something they call willingness to participate and ability to participate. Very many young people are willing to participate, but they are unable because politics in Nigeria remains a very expensive exercise. And I heard Gideon, sort of refer to it. For someone to pick a form to contest for presidency, in some of the major political parties, the form alone is sold as much as 100 million naira. I don't know how much that is in dollars, but a rough calculation will be, I want people to help me here. 100 million naira will be maybe more than maybe $50,000 probably. And that is just for the form alone. Very many young people, 100 million naira. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know the immediate translation to dollars. The exchange rate situation here is very interesting. But then I want to say that very many young people are really interested in participating in the elections, but they are unable because they cannot afford, what it takes. They can't afford. Yeah, it's about 135. I think $135,000. So many people who are interested in
this number.
In very many young people who are interested in. Very many young people who are interested in participating in elections cannot afford to buy the forms, not to talk about campaigns. And in talking about this, I speak to the issue of campaign financing, the lax campaign financing laws and the regulations, and this is making politics in Nigeria available for the highest bidder. And anyone who is monitoring the politics in the country very closely, the fact that the young people have, and many women have not been able to break in, is the fact that those who are making the rules have made sure that it is favoring the rich and only the rich alone. Now, with the level of unemployment amongst young people and the level of poverty, it is almost impossible, even for those who are willing, to be able to participate. Another thing I would like to speak to is, of course, things that are historical, social, and religious constraints. These have improved considerably. There's an effort across the country there's a lot of improvement in that arena, but they still do exist, for many mothers.
Okay. Okay. So maybe Kester and Anu, we've heard both from Gideon as well as Dr. Uche on areas, some of the issues and challenges. Maybe now what we could do is start moving a little bit towards the solutions or the innovations, or if not solution or innovation, because one of the things that I constantly heard both from Gideon as well as from Dr. Uche was that there is a lack of ability as well, right? There is a lack of understanding, lack of sensitization, which means there's a huge need for awareness and capacity building that is required. And that goes far beyond, just saying that we need to do this. Because yes, you want to do it. And as Gideon said, passion is not enough, right? You have to also be able to do it. So what can we do? Maybe one of the biggest solutions is to look at creating sensitization programs and to build capacity. So any thoughts on that? Are there policies that will help you to do this? Are there programs that are helping us to do this? Are there practices within organizations and groups that are helping us to do this? So I would request either one of you to come in here and share a bit about that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Karen.
I can share a
I'm
couple
quite
of things. I think
fascinated.
something that.
Oh, I think Dr. Uche has come in.
Okay, Dr. Uche, go ahead.
Dr. Uche, can we hold on? I'll come back to you again. Yes, Kester, please go ahead. Go ahead, Kester.
Okay, so I'm quite fascinated by what was mentioned by both Gideon and Dr. Uche, particularly setting the framework of what the challenges are for the youth. The barrier to entry is high. The money for the purchase of political form is expensive. They need to reduce it. Political parties need to make it easy for young people to go into political offices in Nigeria. If the prices for those forms are in the millions, then it's becoming difficult for young people to purchase the form. That's number one. The bill that Gideon mentioned, not too young to run, that the president signed into law so many years ago, is very paramount that the provision of that law is made enforceable. You can't just put law in a place and people at the age of 60s, 70s are still running for political offices, while the young people who have ideas, who could talk about artificial intelligence, who could talk about new intervention in economy, who could talk about technology around the world, are not given the privilege of running for political offices. So that law must be made enforceable, where young people are given the privilege to run for political offices. Then the gender balance issue. You find out today in our government, a lot of female ministers in government are the stereotypical offices that they give to many of them. Minister for Women Affairs, junior ministers in government. Let us embrace what is presently happening. I'm not citing this country as a model, but today in Africa, Rwanda leads the way as the only country that has 50 versus 50 in terms of gender balancing in government. We must embrace what Rwanda is doing presently, where we give opportunities to female to be in government and senior ministers in government is very critical. Another thing that they've mentioned, which is so critical for me, Gideon pointed something out and Dr. Uche also supported it. The young people are tired of complaining. The economic challenges, the inequity, issue that so many of them are not given the privilege to exercise their franchise, being given opportunity to participate in government. Those are the issues that we've mentioned. And I'm quite happy today that the Chevening team in the British High Commission and the Chevening Alumni Association of Nigeria and your team, Karen, brought this issue to the fore. So we begin to point a lot of light on these various challenges that they've mentioned. Over to you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kester. And absolutely, this is a very critical issue that we need to have. And, I just want to point out, this is a problem not just with Nigeria, right? I think this is an issue across countries, and it doesn't matter which kind of country you are or where you are from, we are facing this issue that unless we bring youth and women more and more into politics and at every level. So I think, way ahead by actually creating policies that are enabling this to happen. Most countries do not even have that, right? So I think, that's a huge step in the right direction. And of course, yes, will matter a lot to encourage more and more youth and women to feel, yes, I can do this. Yes, I should be doing it. And finally, yes, I'm going to do it, right? Because that's what we want them to do, right? So Anu, the UN SDG goals has a very big part, especially when you look at SDG 5, how to bring women into politics, discrimination, empowering them, is definitely a big part of this. And then also when you look at peace and justice, that again, and we like to talk about the SDGs as interlinked, right? Because this is how it is and should be addressed in terms of its holistic approach. So maybe you could bring in a little bit on how these issues are impacting the SDGs and vice versa, how the SDGs are helping to get more youth and women in politics. Over to you.
Yeah, Karen, and the rest of the team here, what has been said is absolutely the reality on the ground. The best thing about the SDGs is that it gives us a focus. It does not allow us to meander along. It tells us where we are when it comes to the global platform, where we are when it comes to our country's performance. And it is a very important time for Nigeria because we are evaluating ourselves against what's the reality on the ground. Along with what everybody else has said, the conventions, the treaties, the bills, the affirmative actions, the sensitization, the capacity building. One aspect, as we see, as things are moving along towards, the elections are to be held towards the end of this month, is also the specific aspect of electoral violence. Now, violence is a critical thing when it comes to creating anxiety and fear in people who come forward. When it comes to a female candidate or a youth who, besides not having all the other things to back them up, is also faced with these added aspects. Let's say very recently, I was involved or rather participated and engaged in some great work that the government is trying to do in terms of sensitizing security agencies as to how they can give special protection to female voters. I mean, that's also in front, where the voters can come, and we're talking about women participating and having a voice in these aspects. So it is not in one sector that the work needs to be done. It is across sectors, and which sectors will take priority depends on who is clearly involved in the short term, in the long term, and the medium term. For us, when election is right there at the doorstep, the most important aspect is how do we hold peaceful elections in Nigeria, and how do we ensure that maximum number of people are going to have the opportunity to vote and to have a election result, which is fair. And this is where this time, and I'm sure my colleagues here will also talk about the technological advancement which the Nigerian government has done in terms of voter registration and the polling and the result that has to be transmitted. So a lot of technical and technological advancement has taken place. So these incremental changes we have to acknowledge, but it's a long way off from what we want to see in terms of youth and women actually being part of it. And that will come gradually through local level actions. I know of efforts by different agencies, including CSOs, to have political academies where women can be, their capacities can be enhanced to be able to go out there and campaign for themselves, stand up as a candidate and put their mandates forward. It is not an easy process, especially because of what we call the societal norms, the power dynamics, the resource constraint, the financial issues, the role of money when it comes to vote buying, etc. So it's so layered that each of these aspects will have to be slowly dealt with. But the starting point is conscientization. And I feel Nigeria, the African giant, has a lot to give to this continent in terms of what it can achieve in terms of numbers, because SDG is also a matter of numbers. You know, when countries like Nigeria or let's say India have progress in a certain goal, it is going to create a global impact. So to speak, I am very positive, despite what we hear, that there is no way to go but up. And these incremental changes are going to bring about some definite relief to the participation of women in Nigeria, in the politics of Nigeria.
And thinking about Nigeria and the way we are talking about it, it can become a role model. Because I think what you mentioned just now, every single step we take matters, right? It doesn't matter if it's a small step, but that every single step when you're moving forward can make a big difference. And the more we can highlight those steps and highlight every single win we have, the easier it is for those who follow, you know, and therefore making sure that we create more awareness around these will definitely make a big difference. So definitely, and of course, guiding lights like Gideon, I'm very sure, will inspire more youth to be a part of it, right? So Gideon, do we have you back again?
Yeah, absolutely, I'm here.
Awesome. Okay. So we're going to continue with this. And Dr. Uche also is back and Hawa is back. And I'm really excited to see that. So Gideon, I'm going to keep you on hold one more time if you don't mind. I'm sorry. But maybe I'll quickly ask Hawa because she seems to have the most problems with her bandwidth. So Hawa, can you very quickly come in and hopefully we will hear you speak with a quick intro as well?
Yeah, can you hear me now, Karen?
Yay, absolutely.
Oh, finally. I am so scared of connection now. I don't want to turn my video on in case it trips off everything. So I will beg your pardon. I would like to speak with my video off, if that's okay. It's a pleasure to be in this session. Good day, everyone. I'm not sure which part of the world you are, so I'll say good day. My name is Hawa Abdullahi Gambo. I have been a journalist for a little bit over 20 years, but I'm currently the ADC House of Representative candidate running to represent my constituency, which is Chukun Kajuru Federal Constituency from Kaduna State. So even though I have had a terrible connectivity, but I have been able to grasp some points that Dr. Olanrewaju and Gideon shared about the challenges that women and youth have been having in having a space in the polity. A lot of it is very accurate and apt, but you know, being involved gives me a completely different perspective and viewpoint of the challenges. But one challenge that we cannot afford to overlook is that of economic capacity. Women and youth, it's a global trend. I have realized women and youth have been severely marginalized economically all over the world. And Nigeria is slightly a little bit different in so many instances. So that is one stumbling block. And I would like to say that it is key to everything in the sense that, let me give you an example. A young widow with 3 children who desires to further her education may not be able to afford that unless she is financially capable, either has had her own economic capacity or has inherited some considerable amount of money from the late husband, or she's from a very understanding, supportive family who are willing to support and see her through school. This is one aspect of the lives of many Nigerian women that a lot of people seem to just casually overlook and pretend as if it doesn't exist, but it does. We're still talking about girl-child education in this country, specifically my part of the country, the North. We have not broken even in terms of girl-child enrollment in schools. since I think about for the past 20 years, the statistics have more or less been the same with a very slight margin. So that means automatically that the age of girl marriages is still basically the same, especially from my part of the country. 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, maximum 18-year-olds are getting married without having had a considerable amount of education. And so by the time they get to that age where they become politically and economically aware, for them to realize, okay, I have a voice and I need to exercise this voice and I need to get into the political space to be able to contribute my quota to building my society and community, then she may not have the value to contribute in terms of not having had the opportunity to grow academically, intellectually, and economically. So the children that are raised by that mother are very more likely to be in the same shoes as their mother. So it is a very much kind of vicious cycle that continues to go around repeatedly in our communities and societies. And it's something I have seen and witnessed my entire life. And I think the fact that I have always felt it isn't right since when I was a young girl is one of the reasons that has brought me to this space and stage I am in my life. There is a deliberate attempt. I always say this. There is a deliberate attempt by the elitist and ruling class in Nigeria to retain the status quo. Their wives and their children, the young people, may not necessarily have the drive and the desire for political inclusion because they don't see any need for it. The cycle in the society that sees and understands the need have been disenfranchised for generations. They are economically crippled. They are sometimes even academically crippled in the sense that they have very little percentage of generational intellectualism in their family or none at all. They could be a black sheep. Perhaps the only person with the ability and opportunity to have an education. So in such situations, it is extremely difficult for a young person or a woman to get into that space, much less have an opportunity to get a ticket to run. Now, there are a lot of steps required to get a ticket, one of which is the economic capacity that I think Kester mentioned. Yes, the economic capacity to acquire a ticket to enable a person run as a candidate is very humongous. We all know that. But I have come across women who have the money to acquire their tickets and they go ahead and buy their tickets, but then they are forced to step down on their candidacy by the political elite in their states. I have met women from Zamfara State, Sokoto State, Kano State. They have their monies, they have bought their tickets, but the political elites will force them to step down. Moreover, despite the fact that there are some women who will refuse to step down on their candidacy, they go ahead and contest, but then at the end of the day, due to one reason or the other, their mandate will be muscled away again and denied. For example, Mama Taraba, that's Aisha Jume Al-Hassan of blessed memory, the first gubernatorial politically elected female governor in northern Nigeria, whose mandate was denied her. Everybody knows that she won the election, but the political elite muscled the mandate away from her and she was compensated with a ministerial appointment. These are issues that are very key and paramount in determining what are the causes of women exclusion in the polity. And these are issues that are derivable from a long-held misogyny that has been imprinted in the minds and memories of a lot of people in this, particularly from my part of the country. I would say people, I would not say men, because I have met a lot of misogynistic women that hold the same kind of beliefs that hold women back. There are a lot of women that hold those beliefs as well. So it's not a gender thing. It is, shall I say, a cultural or traditional conditioning? I don't think so, because I know that there are a lot of beautifully balanced cultural traditional stories from my part of the world that portrays women inclusion, that portrays strong, politically savvy and aware women. But, you know, these stories continue to be muscled and they continue to be stamped upon so that people will not get to know about them properly. Now, when we come to economic capacity for women and youth, there is a very strong
Okay, did we lose Hawa? I'll just wait for a second to check if she comes back. No, I think we've lost her. Okay, so we move to Dr. Uche. Dr. Uche, can I please request you to come in and share your thoughts on this?
Yes, I think Hawa was making the right points. She was speaking to us as a practitioner, which is very helpful. And I think she re-echoes some of the challenges and, you know, especially amplifying the fact that, yes, money is important, but then there is also the deliberate effort by the political elite to exclude women even when they have money.
Right.
And that is...
I'm just going to make one request, because keeping in view the time that we are moving towards, that, you know, we've definitely dwelt on challenges earlier, and then we spoke about, you know, the potential ways that we could build the capacities and create awareness, etc. Maybe we can start talking about collaboration. Who are those stakeholders? Who are those ecosystem actors, you know, who we need to bring together so that we can create the right kind of partnership? Because as I explained at the beginning, we want to encourage people to think different and act together, right? So how are we going to start acting together? You know, that is really going to be the key, right, to creating the successful stories that we want out there, because no one party or group or organization or institution is going to be able to do this alone. So what do you think is really required from a collaboration point of view? If I can ask you to please.
I think we require civic education. Yes, I think the one point for collaboration is civic education. This, I cannot emphasize this enough. And I think that there are a lot of possibilities. Civil society groups, professional associations like the Chevening Alumni Association, which is, by the way, doing a very great work in trying to reach out to members and even share information. Because at the end of the day, some of the constraints we identified are not things that cannot be overcome. Historically, the turnout, for instance, of Nigerian elections have been 35% or less than 40%. So what it means that people actually get registered and do not manage to vote. So I think that there is a need for an intensive civic education and mobilization. Mobilization first for voters, to potential voters to get registered. Also election day mobilization, so that these people who get registered and who have their voters card can manage to find their way to the polling units, queue up and vote. So I think that, you know, between now, for instance, and the elections, there is a whole lot of work that can happen. And we need all the collaboration necessary. And as part of the collaboration for civic education is that we need technology. Nobody can emphasize technology enough again. Today, you know, we are doing this session courtesy of technology. So I think that there's a lot we can leverage as young people, both wherever we are, by leveraging on technology. And there's a lot of partnership, as it were, in these regards, and there's a lot we can benefit, in terms of creating the right platforms, and in terms of trying to, decouple some of these messages into comprehensive and comprehensible manner, in a way that is acceptable to the young people. As the young people are, and I'm not sure I categorize myself as one, there are things that they like. I mean, there's a kind of messaging that appeals to them. So I think that there needs to be a deliberate effort to decouple some of these messages in a manner that appeals to the young people. And I think that could be an important point for collaboration. Another important point for collaboration is something that Gideon mentioned earlier, and that is the issue of mentoring. I think that, regardless of, where we are, there are people across our alumni association globally. There are success stories. There are those who have participated in politics. What can we learn from them? How can we create platforms for a deliberate mentoring and what Gideon called leadership development? So not only civic education, not only emphasizing the role of technology, I think there's an important role, we can play, both as individuals and as groups, by deliberately looking into our fold, encouraging one another, mentoring one another, not only for the elections, but also in between elections. Because how it happens in most of our countries is that now that is a few weeks to elections, everybody is talking about elections, and that's fine, okay? But there's a lot that happens in between elections. You groom leaders in between elections. So we really need to find a way to make it a point of duty to talk and think and develop leadership skills amongst ourselves, build the right capacity, do civic education, not only for elections, but in between elections. And we also need to mobilize resources. Resource mobilization is an important area that, we all choose to gloss over for several reasons. But I think that for these things that I'm talking about to happen, we need to deliberately mobilize resources. And to mobilize these resources, we need to be innovative because, one man told me a long time ago, or one individual, told me a long time ago that there's actually money, but what is not available is access. So I think that there's a need for innovation for us to create access to the resources that are available. How can we structure these conversations in a manner that they can attract the kind of resources we need? Because these resources are available. I mean, for the things we are doing with Raisina Dialogue and for India, anybody who is talking about G20 and G20 related conversations will probably get some attention from India. So I think that the way we frame these conversations will be important going forward to be able to mobilize the kind of resources we need to deploy to make sure that we can translate some of these fantastic thoughts we're sharing to concrete action to deliver the change we all anticipate, not only for the elections, but in between elections.
Great. I think that is a very, very big point. And I just want to add maybe, or maybe not add, because I think you've covered it, but I like to just, kind of add a dimension to that, is that when we talk about civic education, I think we need to also talk about it in the context of community engagement, because unfortunately sometimes it is more the technical aspects of civic duties, those kind of things that we talk about, which may not completely bring in the community engagement bit. And unfortunately, more often than not, we see that in the political arena, as you rightly said, it is only at the time of elections that everybody starts getting up and wants to get involved in every single thing. and of course go canvassing. But what happens during, right? Because ultimately, voters, ultimately people who are going to support you are going to be those who will remember what you do in between. And that's such an important point that you brought up, Dr. Uche, and thank you so very much for sharing that as well. Yeah. So Gideon, yes, finally we come back to you, and of course would like you to come in and talk about collaboration again in terms, and you did mention mentoring, which again Dr. Uche brought up with, but again, again, I would like to repeat the same thing. Who are those actors who you feel are sorely missing, and who have got to come in? Because one of the topics was also technology. So I think, talk about the citizenship piece, we talk about the partnership piece, but very often we miss the entrepreneurship piece. Who are those people with knowledge and talent and resources who can support this process? Yeah, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I mean, if there is a significant contributor or contribution that I would like to point out, would be, tracing back how Cambridge Analytica was actually spotlighted as a huge contributor to the presidential election that brought in Donald Trump to become the president of the United States of America. It emphasizes the significant role that the media or media organizations does play in, number one, dispelling misinformation or spreading misinformation. So it depends on how we want to channel the media, right? It is important to know that something that has critically worked for many, political actors who set out to confuse the electorate will be to leverage on the power of misinformation. And the only way that political actors who have, quote and unquote, the fear of God and are huge proponent of democracy will be to counteract that using media as well by, doing things like fact checking. Political actors themselves sometimes like something I refer to as misrepresentation of facts, particularly during campaigning and trying to sway people's opinion to, make themselves the favorites. And if there's anything that I know that a particular group of people can do, will be to dispel this fake news and misrepresented fact. And that would be where the media comes in, right? And I'm not talking about traditional media right now. I'm talking about the power of social media. If there's something that traditional media would do, would be to reach 10 people. What social media would do for you is reach 1 million people by one tweet. So that is what I think social media-based, organizations that work as, media houses can actually do. And we need to work with them to ensure that we can demystify and also advance the tenets of good democracy that gives room for the voices of young people to be heard and for young people to be ably represented within political processes. That is one. The second thing, they are not counted to be very important. I mean, when we talk about, youth influencers, particularly in the current dispensation, we think about people who just dance half naked on TikTok. That is not it. Some of the biggest, for example, the BTS Korean music group, some years back, I think 2018 or 2019, made a very interesting appearance at the United Nations General Assembly. That is an institution recognizing the role of K-pop culture as a tool to shape social agenda. That is something too that can be leveraged on. In Nigeria, for example, we are seeing institutions that are not political, by the way, that are leveraging on the popularity and social influence or acceptability of creators like Firoz. Firoz is a Nigerian musician. Like another one, we call him Mr. Macaroni. These are young people who are leveraging on the media to create comical content. But at the same time, because humor is a currency in Nigeria that makes people money, it can also be leveraged. These creators are key constituency that we can also leverage on to amplify that key message of youth and women involvement and needful, engagement in political structures. Lastly, would be religious institutions. It's a banter, right? But I will use some examples. Nigerians are one of the most religious people on planet Earth. I'll give you an example. The Redeemed Christian Church of God, one of Nigeria's largest Pentecostal church, has a branch in every 5 minutes walking distance, right? The same thing applies to the different, Muslim and Saruddin and so many. We are very prayerful people. We have more, interestingly, we have more churches and mosques than classrooms and schools. That in itself, how sardonic it sounds, it also points to the importance or significance of religious institutions and the leaders of these institutions. If we want to circulate the message, help people get to understand why they need to come forward to not only get involved in political process, we need to leverage on these structures, which is the religious structures. So we need to be able to cultivate the social capital or the reach of these religious institutions to reach their followers or their worshippers in ensuring that we circulate the message of our collective interest in ensuring that we get more young people and more women into the political processes. It is really, really important if we can leverage on all of this. But I think on a final note, it is only because we have imbibed this ideology that there is a popular saying that I've had young people like myself say so many times, which is politics is not for me. And we make that utterance many times because of the way the government themselves or political leaders have ensured to make the political process unattractive for young people to get involved. So by virtue of the hills and the rods that we feel from the system, we concede to say we don't want to get involved. We say we don't want to get engaged in the process because they make it unattractive. They make it look like if I get in that system, I'll become corrupt, right? But you cannot change a system from outside it. You need to get into that system to turn it around. And that is the same thing that, for a while, I also ran on that kind of campaign that I would rather get engaged in social development structures. But I'm beginning to see that you cannot practice technocratism from outside political systems. You have to take your skills, your expertise, your global exposure, your academic training, your spiritual upbringing to go in the system and change it. So it is important as well that we need to go in there ourselves, encourage people around us, friends, family, from our immediate environment to begin to cultivate. It might not happen right now in the immediate, but give it time, 4-8 years. I believe we'll have more young people. I believe we'll have more women engaged within occupying political offices within the Nigerian political system. Over to you, Karen.
Well, I do know one thing. With passionate people like you, Gideon and Dr. Uche, I am very sure, that we will have, for sure, more women and youth in politics coming out soon. So I'm going to come here. Can you believe it? We're almost done with 2 hours. Did you even realize where the 2 hours were?
Not at all.
I don't think so. Absolutely. So I'm going to pull in Kester and Anu back into the conversation because I want one last set of words. And but before I say that, I think that was so well put because Dr. Uche spoke about civil society, and yes, we need them. We need the educators. We need those. But bringing in faith-based organizations, bringing in media, bringing in technology, bringing in entrepreneurs, bringing in business, I think all these elements are critical for us to be able to make it actually happen and make it successful so that it stays for the long term and the sustainable outcomes that we are looking to have an impact. Because unfortunately in the social sector, when we talk about development, we think about metrics more from a point of view of output. And we'll use the word outcomes and impact for them. Whereas the reality is what we talk more often than not is just the output. So if we want change to happen, we want transformation to happen, it has to be for the long term. And therefore, I'm going to request all of you to come back in and give your last piece of advice to youth and women. How do they get more involved? What should they be doing? Last piece of advice from each one of you. And then we will close with Anu giving us the closing and summary of everything we discussed. Does that sound like a great idea?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So Kester, do you want to go? And Anu can close at the last end. So maybe Kester, then Dr. Uche and Gideon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I really appreciate the contribution of Prince Gideon and Dr. Uche. Before Hawa was cut off, I also appreciate the perspective she brought to the table as a participator and a contestant for political office in Nigeria. I think she really threw a lot of light on the challenges, particularly the drawback for women, the misogyny in our society, the biggest challenges of not recognizing women, particularly when it comes to political aspiration. And each one brought to the fore what the challenges are. So in terms of solution, I'm preferring what I would call an intervention in resolving the various barriers that limit youth and women towards participation, full participation in political activities in Nigeria. I will mention two things that are very dear to my heart. It is beyond putting into force the young to run or young to run law in Nigeria. Let the full force of the provision be enforceable in the law, not just in the National Assembly, in the Senate, or in the House of Reps. Let the various provision of that law be put into force, because there are many laws in Nigeria. It's implementation that matters. Full implementation is what matters. Then, another thing I also want to mention is the various think tanks that we have in our nation. The Nigerian Institute for International Affairs, the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Study in Kuru, and various socio-political organizations. They should be given opportunity to debate, to participate in election monitoring. Election monitoring in Nigeria, beyond giving opportunities to various diplomatic corps, various associations, they should recognize these people to monitor the election, to supervise the electoral processes. It's critical when you have independent umpires supervising the electoral processes. There will be room for transparency. That is one thing I've noticed. It is so critical you give these stakeholders opportunities to monitor, to also give independent views and report. If you check the data of people that register across the country, you find out that so many persons just register to have a means of identification. How many of them participate in voting? That is one thing. Also, electoral violence. How well do we monitor to say there must not be rigging? There must not be opportunity for people to be restricted from voting. Thuggery and intimidation should be reduced to a lot of, let me say, so many of the countries across the local government in the countries. How many persons have access to vote? Then another thing is technological improvement. What the Independent National Electoral Commission, a lot of them had not put in place technological provision, what I would call opportunities for people to have a card reader. In the last election, so many persons were disenfranchised because there was a failure of the card reader. So how well are we prepared now this month, as election, to say it is going to be foolproof? There will be a lot of opportunities for people to know, oh, now your card is being read by the machine. There's no hiccups. There are no challenges with the technological tools that we're using to assess the PVC. Those are things I've discovered recently that may disenfranchise young people and women from voting. Thank you so much, Carol.
And I'm sure that this is going to motivate many more women and youth to join us, join in politics, and also join in the thoughts that we have been sharing over here right now. Thoughts and actions, actually, because we don't want just thinking. We, as you said, think different, act together. So thank you so much. Great. Dr. Uche, I will ask you to give your final advice, and then we'll move to Anu and close the session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that what I would like to say is that, yes, the young people are active, they are engaged, but the time lag between having their PVCs and getting to the polling units, voting, and watching their votes, they're important to get their voices heard. So interest is important, being engaged is important, being in the social media is wonderful, but ultimately what we count is waking up on that election day and making sure they can walk to the polling units, cast their votes, and be able to hang around and be sure that their votes are counted and their voices count. So it is important that the young people have the patience and the resilience to follow through. And if it is if there's one important thing I'd like to say, especially as it relates to our context, it is to make sure that the kind of enthusiasm we show in the social media, which is great, we can translate that on the election day to make sure that our votes become our voices. Having said that, I also want to say that we need to continue the engagement. We need to continue the peer learning. We need to learn from each other. We need to continue to connect. Now that technology has offered us, the opportunity, and if there's something the pandemic, foisted on us, and that is how to connect to each other remotely without being in person. I think that we need to, now that the pandemic is over, there is a tendency, for us to sort of begin to insist that we must meet in person, which is fantastic. There's a social content to it, but we must also, as much as possible, leverage on the technological-based engagement platforms like the one we're doing to encourage one another, to mentor one another, to talk to each other, to learn. I think that if we're able to do these two things, first is to practice what we preach, to follow through. Second is to continue and remain engaged and learn from each other. I am certain that as much as our contexts are similar, we can find a way to bring what has happened and succeeded elsewhere. The young people defined what happened in Zambia. The young people were told contributed to what happened in Kenya. Why not Nigeria? So there's a lot we can learn to sort of take some of these good things that have happened outside our shores, within the continent and outside the continent, to bring them home so that we'll understand that if it is possible elsewhere, it can also be possible in our climate. I rest my case.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Uche. I think, one of the things that I always say, those who learn are the leaders, literally. Because when you're open to looking and learning from others, that's a sure shot sign of continuous improvement. And when you are continuously improving, you're definitely going to be the leader. And I think just having that open attitude towards learning is going to change what Nigeria has, and to offer to the world as well. Not just learning, but will definitely be offering to the world. So I'm so glad to be part of that process, if at all, in a small way through this session. I'm sorely missing Hua. Honestly, I feel her voice would have been phenomenal in this session, and there would have been a lot that she would have contributed, which has been very, very valuable. But I hope that we can do this maybe another time, and bring that voice in. Maybe we can bring it into the report through whatever she has had to say, and we will make sure that we don't lose out on that at all for this session and for the report that will come out of this session. So I think we're ready to close, and before we close, I just want to encourage all of you to continue to explore the platform, join us in other sessions. There's a lot happening. This is probably the latest session we've had. It's midnight in India, but we are more than happy and awake to be a part of the Nigerian music. Anu, over to you.
Thank you, Karen. This was an extremely important session for me because somebody coming into Nigeria and witnessing it firsthand, I know as somebody who's come from outside that Nigeria is currently at a stage where things have to transform. And we are seeing the excitement, the anxiety, both sides of it, as to where the women and the youth, especially the youth, the NSAS movement has told us that they are not willing to sit down and wait and watch as to what can happen. And that space is getting created. So this is a very critical moment. And from here onwards, what we see, as I said, I want to be very positive about it, that incremental changes are going to happen. Having said that, I'm just going to reiterate what our speakers have already spoken, is the fact that everything starts with ourselves. So in this case, where women and youth are concerned, we are talking about each of us, each of the woman out there, the young person out there, to be stepping up, to be doing what is the right thing for them to be doing, to make this actually an active engagement and participation. Once you believe that this is my country, this is my responsibility, it is my right, I have a say, I don't need others to tell me what I should or should not be doing, then we will see a big change, and that comes from within. That's the first point, the individual. And I'll take it to the next one, that things cannot work unless there's an enabling environment. Going forward, I hope the country sees some of those legal frameworks and affirmative actions that are required for the youth and women to actually participate. It can be any form. It can be voluntary quota. It can be proportionate representation. We are not going into what needs to be. But as long as the entire society comes together and shows solidarity that this needs to happen, then things are definitely going to change. Nigeria is no different from other countries where it has already taken place, which brings me to the last point about collaboration, South-South collaboration. For me, coming from the institution I know there is a lot that we can learn from South-South collaboration. Within the continent itself, or we look at the right or left side, there's so many good examples of how women have come to power at each level, the national, and the local levels. And that's a great lesson that can be brought together, contextualized to the Nigerian context, and things taken forward. So I would leave this place with a big excitement in my heart. The only last message from my side will be that no matter what happens, which way it swings, there is no space for violence from anybody. And that goes for the youth, for the candidates, for the people who are engaged in violence is not the answer to anything. We have to patiently work it out, and it is workable going forward. That's it from my side, Karen.
Wow. All midnight, and they say at midnight Cinderella changes. So maybe that's analogy I want to keep in mind, that we are going to change, but not the way Cinderella changed back to the old, but we are going to change back to the new, and that's what I think we want to really make happen over here. And I really hope that this session has been as enriching for our audience and those who are going to see it as it has been for me. I am an outsider. I do not know much about Nigeria's political situation, but I can sense and see what is that change that all of you want to bring about. And I am very confident that that is going to happen. My very, very best to each one of you. And yes, let's keep moving on, because like Anu said, cooperation, is the key, right? Collaboration is going to make a difference. And so the more we keep exchanging and learning from each other, I think there is no stopping us and no stopping Nigeria. All the very best. Thank you very much. Have a great day.